All right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to whichever time zone you're from. I'm hoping that you're from a time zone that allows this good morning to be valid. I was ready to start. Let's pretend, because I just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to say the words that Satyam Fasale, SS, and a bunch of other people have said, which is late OP. Late OP to all of you too. Late OP to everybody. Late OP is a new festival that we have, which never happens because everybody who's attending is late. So it's an exciting day for late OP. I hope everybody's good. Ayush Yadav says Kimber the Timber. That's amazing. Jayesh Tripathi says it's a cruel world out there, guys. Like the stream and make this world a better place to live. I like how you think that's going to improve things in this world. But Jayesh, I'm not going to disagree with you as long as we get the likes, because at the end of the day, that's all we want in life. We're desperate, psychotic people. Tanuj Jain, I think coming late is a good luck somewhere in the world. Okay, I'm assuming that's a sensual pun. I will accept that as well. A lot of people tuning in, please give a like if you can so that more people tune in, because that's how the YouTube algorithms work. And we want to game the system. That's correct. Tanjain, as punishment, make me mod now. Okay, that's I don't know if that's punishment. I think the mods are enjoying their lives. As punishment, okay. Kimber को बोलियो Kimber का timber. Ayush Yadav. तेरा हो गया यार, बोल दिया. I've said it. Okay, couple of things to announce before I begin and bring on Jared Kimber is first of all, if you've not seen Jared Kimber's work, I would suggest please head over. Why is somebody saying no sound? There is sound, right? Am I losing my mind? There is sound. You guys can hear me. Okay, now people are just messing with my head because of how unprofessional I generally am. Praneet Sangadi says, take the cab. Brother, it's too early for that. Mehtab Khan says, Saurabh is very different in the morning. I'm full of life in the morning. By evening, doing kids' work and trying to make money and all this nonsense just derails everything. Tandoor says, call TVF aspirants cast, please, please, please. Honestly, I haven't seen the show yet. I will watch the show and then I'll get in touch with the TVF people and try and get them. I know a lot of people have recommended them. I will try and do them. This is a new room, as you can see. That's a painting that my wife made. She's learning art and how to hold pencils. One day she'll be good enough to actually be able to paint properly. If you've never seen the show before, let me say a few things. You basically can ask questions to Jared or me. We're going to be talking about the IPL as well as all sorts of other cricket related things, because Jared has been involved in cricket in really interesting ways for a really long time. I remember cricket with balls, and I remember thinking, "Oh, this is super fun and ridiculous," and I used to love it. So yeah, lots of questions to him about the IPL, about all sorts of things we'll have. Before that, just have to plug a few things. One is I have a sister. Okay, she's one of my personal sisters. We have the same parents and everything. All the arrangements that usually happen with sisters has happened. My sister has a brand new book out, which is called "The Terrible, Horrible, Very Bad Good News," which I don't know if you can see. Okay, like we're like that. ऐसे करेंगे. This is perfect. That's out right now. It's a comedy book, so if you want to read something light and fun during the pandemic, please go ahead and pick it up and support her. And if you've read the book, then please give a review so that it helps her out. You'll be very nice people. Okay, there you go. I've put the link in the comments as well. Daya Bharadwaj says, buy a better mic. Brother, okay, you know what? I will acknowledge the mic situation, but I don't want to keep Jared waiting for too long. Uh, I will. Okay, I have a great mic. I'm just using this mic because my children threw away my Bluetooth mic. That's all I want to say. My Bluetooth earphones. This is not the earphone which this is coming from. This is a different thing. Want to thank a couple of people who supported the show on InstaMojo. Ashish Telang, thanks a lot for your support. Really appreciate it. Amrita Ravi Mohan, I already announced the last time. And PayPal, we have Danish Aslam. That sounds like a very familiar name. So thanks to all of you people. Again, one more thing I just want to say is that I have finally decided that I need to start doing Zoom shows on comedy shows on Zoom, since the entire I had to cancel 16 shows for obvious reasons. So on this Saturday, I am going to be doing a show which is going to be happening weekly, every Saturday, where I'm going to be talking about the news and everything that's happening out there. And tickets are not out on Book My Show yet. This is the show, if you can see, it's called The Expert. And I'm going to be covering everything that's happening in the news, and also a lot of stuff that I can't talk about on YouTube lives, which includes politics and all the rest of that stuff. So the tickets should be on Book My Show by tomorrow. If you still want to get tickets, they're for $2.99, very cheap tickets. Because again, the show is brand new every week. You can buy tickets for a bunch of them, but since Book My Show's not up and you want to go, just go to InstaMojo, pay the $2.99 that's there, and just say the expert in the subject. That's it. So this Saturday at 8:30 p.m. we're starting that. If you're a YouTube member on my original channel, you get in free. That's about it. That's all I have to say. Okay, it's time for our guest of honor. That's when my momentum goes up. Okay. He has done many things in life. He was the first, arguably the first cricket blogger to become viral. Is that a thing? He also used to write for Crick Buzz, if I'm not mistaken. He's been an analyst for a bunch of teams, and he has a channel which is really fascinating. Please give it up for Mr. Jared Kimber. Jared, please come on.
Hello. I think
Hi.
Crick Buzz is the only place I haven't worked for. So well done on picking the one place I haven't written for.
The Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation is one of his starring roles. He was there for 7 years. Oh, was it Crick Info? Am I completely wrong?
Crick Info, yeah. I was at Crick Info for a long time. But to be fair, I've written for every cricket publication, including a website called Crick Dude, which was opened by Sachin Tendulkar on a laptop, and the owner of Crick Dude has still not paid me. So if he's out there watching this, you still owe me my money.
Oh my God! There's always these three people who we always remember who've not paid us as freelancers, right?
At least three, I think. I think in cricket, yeah, it's a long list.
I did a show ages back at a college called SRCC in Delhi, and it was me along with three other comedians, and everyone got paid individually, and I was organizing the show. And I, being a selfless, caring, gentle, great human being that I am, I'm like, hey, you guys pay these guys later. You can pay my stuff after the show is done, and they've still not paid me. I still remember that amount.
Yeah, I've been there, man. I've been there a lot. I'd love to say that cricket is better than that, but it is not.
Yeah. So okay, we got Jared in. We already have lots of people commenting. Again, please give a like because again, algorithms. We have about 400 people. Let's get that up to easily 1,000 can happen. Ritvik Malik already asked a question on Super Chat. I'll come to your question, Ritvik. But in case you guys don't know about Jared, I'm just going to give a brief introduction from my POV. Jared has a YouTube channel, which I've always found really fascinating. He did an entire piece on Neil Wagner, the ultra modernist, which was a great video essay, along with a recent one that you did, which sort of announces you as the Prime Minister of Ben Duncanstan, which is great. And you've also worked for Crick Info before. You've been an analyst for the Scotland team and a bunch of other things. So super resume with regards to cricket. I'm going to ask you about Ben Dunk, okay? Because I'm so fascinated by, as a cricket follower, after a point, it's like, yeah, you got the Virats, you got your Williamsons, you got your Starks, but it's always some off-center cricketer that just suddenly captures your attention.
Yeah, I think I kind of hate it when I have to write about AB de Villiers, which actually I have an article coming up on Cricket Info shortly about, or Virat Kohli or Joe Root, whoever it is, because at a certain point, it's like everyone's already said it. And I'm not saying you can't bring something to it because, you know, if that's kind of your job as a writer, as an analyst and everything. But with someone like Ben Dunk, I remember, I think I put out a tweet. If you have a look really early on, and I think this is the right tweet, although it may not even be the right thing, but I put out a tweet going, it's ridiculous that I can get so fascinated with something that no one else in the world gives a shit about, right? No one else is coming along and going, like, I'm not racing anyone to the Ben Dunk news. And yet here I am. I probably spent 4 days like researching that, going back through my memory, contacting people. Like I literally contacted, I don't want to out these people, but I contacted like major cricket figures about Ben Dunk and go, am I onto something here? And, you know, and talking through, and people just go, why are you calling me about Ben Dunk? Like, you know, you're not calling me about Sandpaper Gate or Jimmy Anderson, Ravi Jadeja in a hallway. You're literally calling me about Ben Dunk. But the truth is that players like Ben Dunk are endlessly fascinating because almost everyone, the minute that video came out, except for a handful of people who literally went, who is Ben Dunk, and went and Googled him, almost everyone else had seen him. Right. And he is that kind of figure. And you know, he's never going to play like, well, he's never going to play Test cricket for Australia. He's probably never going to play for Australia at a World Cup, but he's played everywhere and with everyone. And one day, like, I don't know if you know, but he contacted me on Twitter after the video came out to say, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Like, one day I'm probably going to sit him down and just be like, talk me through your career. And this all comes back to one of my favorite cricketers when I first started Cricket with Balls. You mentioned that before, my original blog was Dirk Nannes. And what I always want to do with Dirk Nannis, and I still might get him to do this one day, is literally to sit him down and go, you have played with this player. Tell me a story about this player, and let him just go wild, because he's played with everyone. You know, he's got Saywag stories. He's got Ponting stories. He's probably got Peter Boren Netherlands stories. Do you know what I mean? And those sorts of people, I just find them, I find them far more interesting than I do AB de Villiers, where I'm just like, oh God, I have to write about someone being really good at something, do I? No, I want to write about the guy who was really good at something, then he wasn't really good at it, then he was really good at it again, then no one hired him when he was really good at it, then everyone hired him when he was really bad at it, and even he must be sitting there going, how am I getting these gigs? Or how am I employed? Now, how am I unemployed? And I think, you know, someone like Ben Dunk is just, he explains so much about how stupid cricket is, like how little we know about it. And, you know, as an analyst, that interest, that straight away, that's my analyst brain of like, that's really interesting. But then my writing brain is, this is actually really funny as well.
Yeah.
And I now have to crack Ben Dunk, because no one else is ever going to do this. This is the last big project that any human being is ever going to do on Ben Dunk, right? So I now have to make it so it is so airtight that Ben Dunk is done. And this is like, people started saying that like there's an anime movie of Ben Dunk now. What a great world,
Really?
you know. So, you know, what an incredible situation to be in. So I suppose that those sorts of cricketers are the ones that really, really have always fascinated me. From, you know, we talked about, you know, Dirk Nannis, you know, Bryce McGain, who obviously has, you know, an incredibly bizarre record. You know, there's some great, you know, Pakistani one. Asif Karim, the Kenyan bowler, you know, and anyone who's ever followed my work will know how much I love him. And it's just like, those guys just don't get their due. They just don't. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this and make it so interesting that everyone is going to care about Ben Dunk, despite the fact that everyone has spent their entire life ignoring Ben Dunk.
I'll be perfectly honest. I remember Ben Dunk played for Mumbai Indians, and I think it didn't really work out nicely, unfortunately. But I remember that video that came out of him running across that wet pitch or whatever, and I remember seeing him running and thinking to myself, "Is this one of the support staff?" Because I kept asking him, like, who's this guy? And then after your video, I'm like, oh, that's the guy. I genuinely, because I think he's more prominent in Australia and the BBL and all the rest of that stuff. I don't think his international exploits really, and again, because he didn't really do that much in the IPL. So yeah,
he's not popular in Australia. No one knows who Ben Dunk is. Like, I'm not having a go at Ben Dunk, because he has had a remarkably odd career. Like, if nothing else, and he can hit the ball like no one you've ever seen. I tried to find this old video that one of his Hobart teammates did, where they were out on the ground, like having some beers, and like someone threw a ball at him, and he just went bang, and the ball just disappears. Right? He's a ridiculous athlete. But no, even in Australia, as big as the Big Bash has gone, he's still sort of like I'm trying to think who, I mean, he's like sub Yusuf Pathan, who he's like Robin Uthappa, maybe. Like, you kind of know his name. Right. And if he's sitting next to you on a plane, you'd introduce yourself and he'd go, I'm Ben Dunk. And you'd be like, oh, like the cricketer Ben Dunk. You'd be like, no, that's me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I always say Uthappa, and Uthappa played more cricket for India, didn't he? But, you know, that sort of, they're there, but you don't really know them. So no, Ben Dunk, that's why Ben Dunk was so interesting to me, is that even within Australia, like I think he might have won the MVP or whatever they call it, best player in one of the early seasons. And then he was the leading run scorer a couple of years later. But there's no street in Australia Ben Dunk could walk down like and be mobbed. Do you know what I mean? Or even stopped. And that's not the case with, you know, a lot of these players. You know, that is not the case, but Ben Dunk has managed to do that. And I think that is something that I really wanted to do on the YouTube channel, where, look, I loved working for Cricinfo and I love working for other cricket publications. But when you say to them, I'm about to write your 7,000 words on Ben Dunk, they're just like, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there. Right. Yeah. But I know why I'm interested in it. And my whole career is following that one thing, right? Which is, I am interested in this thing. I am pretty sure I'm going to follow this and other people are going to find interest. You should have seen people's faces when in 2011, I was like, I'm going to make a film about cricket politics. Yeah. And people were like, you what now? It's exactly the same thing. And I was just like, no, you have to trust me. And that's what I've done. I've built my career on basically kind of trusting that if I find something interesting, I'll find a group of other people that will. And it hasn't always worked, let's be honest. But when it does, it's spectacular.
yeah, like the Neil Wagner video. It's one of my favorite cricket videos out there because it's so, like, in about 12 minutes, it tells me why I like this guy so much. Right? Because I've seen him bowl and instinctively I'm like, there's something strange happening here, which I can't really put down. And then you figure out stats, you figure out analytics, you figure out all of that, and you toss that in there. I'm like, that's all of it adds up perfectly to sort of create this one character. There was one guy who's completely obsessed with, which I can understand this bend dunk obsession of yours. There's a Indian cricketer called Dinesh Mongia.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Dinesh Mongia's big claim to fame was I think he scored 70 odd against England once, and he did pretty well. I think he played about 50 odd matches. And it was so interesting because he seemed like he was just about that level, but not exactly. Right. So you could see that there was that sort of internal struggle, and he was sort of reminding himself that, hey, you belong. And so I went to see a match at Wankhede, and I think Dinesh Mongia was fielding at the, like, right next to me. And in my head, I'm like, dude, that's Dinesh Mongia. And everybody was like, who are you talking about? And I start screaming like a psychopath, Dinesh Mongia, I love you, marry me. And he first he turns around, he's like, if somebody knows me here, it's incredible. So I completely get, like, I like having that, like, I was growing up, I was more obsessed with Darren Gough than I was with Wasim Akram. Because it just that's that action and the fact that he was a little stockier than the rest of them, and he was smiling and he was all of those things. So yeah, it's always the slightly unusual people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Wagner, it's also for me at a certain point, I put up a tweet. I can't remember when it was, maybe 2016, 2017. I put up a tweet going, Neil Wagner's one of the best bowlers in the world, and no one's talking about it, right? And I kind of put that up hoping that would like start a conversation. And the way that cricket media works is it just revolves around the captains and a few stars over and over again, right? And then eventually Neil Wagner gets better, and Neil Wagner gets better, and Neil Wagner gets better. And I'm like, okay. And I think Sid Monga and maybe Barrett might have, Sid Monga and Barrett had written a couple of pieces on him. So a couple of pieces in Cricket Info, a couple of pieces in Crick Buzz. But I'm still like, I don't think anyone has actually nailed the fact that this weird dude who bowls unlike anyone who has ever bowled before. Literally, the West Indians didn't bowl as many bounces as Neil Wagner, right? And they were famous for it. And this guy who looked like a backup, who can't bowl with the new ball, has suddenly become one of the best bowlers in the world. And you're just like, I want this guy to have his due. I want people to understand, why he's successful. I want them to understand how successful he's been, because no one's going to put it this way, everyone's going to be talking about Rabada or Cummins or Bumrah in 2 years' time, and Neil Wagner will be like, the minute he retires, people are just going to be who? Right? He's just going to disappear. So you see those sorts of cricketers, and you're just like, I really want to put them on the level that they deserve to be. So like something I did recently, a big project, and I'll probably do more on it, but I did a radio documentary on the guys from Cool Runnings, right?
Right.
Now, they've got a whole movie about them, right? Everyone knows who they are. One of the guys, I'm trying to remember the exact word, he said his agent told him he was one of the most famous, unfamous people in the world. Yeah. In that, if you say his name, everyone's like, who? And the minute you say one of the guys in the Cool Runnings in the Jamaica bobsled, everyone's like, oh my God, right? Yeah. And I was talking to them, and the thing that people don't know about them is they actually went on to be really good bobsledders. Like, it wasn't that one Olympics, because they basically, one of them was in the bobsled who'd been in there for 3 days, right? How do you become an Olympian in 3 days? And this guy did, right? But those guys went on to be like really good, and Jamaica got really good at the bobsled, and they're still got a team now and all these sorts of things. And you're like, you remember them for that one little thing, but you don't sort of fill it in. And you look at someone like Neil Wagner, and it's like, oh, look, he got to #1 in the world while Pat Cummins was around him, while Jimmy Anderson was around, and all, whatever the thing is you remember, and you're just like, yeah, let's take a moment here. Let's work out that this bloke who couldn't crack it in South Africa, who went to New Zealand and everyone went, okay, he's okay, we'll give him the old ball in a couple of games, and then went on to be one of the world's best bowlers consistently for like 5 years by bowling slow bounces at everyone. What a ridiculous story that is. And I think that, you talk about Mongia, there's so many cricketers and athletes out there that are like that. And I think I just gravitate towards them because they just have the more interesting art. Look,
yeah.
Roger Federer's mum was a tennis coach, and I think that's right, isn't it? Andy Murray's mum was a tennis coach, and Tiger Woods' father, put him into playing golf at 2 and whatever. Those sorts of people are incredible, and their stories and what happens to them as adults is really great. But like, we all know those stories because they've been told to us like 1,000 times. And then you get a cricketer like Ben Dunk, who because he played in the IPL. And someone else knows him because of his 2 stints in the CPL. He pops up in the PSL. In the Big Bash, he got dropped this season in the Big Bash while I was making the video, which is so bizarre, right? But what a ridiculous career he's had to get all those things, to pull them all together, and to develop the way he has. And that's why we like sport, because there's a huge crowd out there that only, and in India, it's a real thing, isn't it? You know about it, that we only like Virat. Before that, we only like Sachin. We only like Roger Federer. We only like Manchester United, all that sort of stuff. I've got no problems with those fans, but I've got nothing in common with them. Because if your favorite player isn't a left back who played for Derby in 1986 and was absolutely terrible, but somehow played for England one time, I don't know how to relate with you. I'm not interested in the best athletes in the world. I'm interested in the athletes who shouldn't have been there in the first place and ended up with a career.
Yeah, and there's so many of these outliers, right? Like one of my favorite cricketers of all time, and I'm not saying this like just like fastly, is Vinod Kambli. Because I remember growing up and watching Vinod Kambli on TV, and I think the one that watching Hanuma Vihari play that knock against Australia essentially nails it. That, hey, listen, I'm your fan for life. This was incredible what he did. And with Kambli, I remember Shane Warne had come down to India, and I think India required about 42 to win a 40 balls. And Kambli, I think, tonked him for about 24 runs in an over. And just like treating him like a net bowler. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I think he had already scored the double century prior to that. And then his whole journey and everything, and the swag that he had and all of that. And then everything that and I still to this day wonder whether he was unfairly removed. Because it seems like he was just badly managed, as opposed to he had... I think the Indian side back then was so civilized, as far as we know, that there was this one guy who used to probably like to drink and whatever, talk to women outside or whatever, and they were just like, this is. I don't know. Maybe there's some backstory which we'll find out much later. But he was the most fascinating guy to me. Yeah.
You'll be happy to know that I've already started a video on him. It'll probably take me a year to get it out. But yeah, he's one of those cricketers. I mean, I grew up watching him, and he just disappeared. And I hate stories like that. It's just like, no. You can't. Those sorts of things are so annoying to me, because it's like, no, there has to be more to this. And his cast is an interesting thing. As you said, his personality. Yeah. It's funny enough when you say that, because I did a big article on Srisanth a couple of years ago where I hung out with Srisanth, and he was saying to me that, and this was like, what, 15, 20 years after Camberley, he was saying that, like, if you were a partying Indian player at that stage, it did not go down well. So how would it have gone down in the 90s? Like, I can't even imagine that. So yeah, I think those sorts of players, and the ones who, I'm working on a video at the moment on Mustafizur Rahman. This guy who Bangladesh never really had any pace bowlers that anyone gave any shits about, really. He turns up and in 1 year basically gets in the ICC ODI team, destroys India in a series, wins an IPL, right? And then basically rips his shoulder in half. What a fantastic story that is. And now he's made a comeback. I'm like, that's what I want to know. I want to know how good he was in that period, but also how has he managed to come back? What's different? Why is he not as good as he was? Is it just the shoulder? Has anyone ever bowled like him before? Those sorts of cricketers, I can't, there's so many great stories out there. And I think that, cricket writing's got a lot better over the last 10 years or so. It's actually just, as much as anything, it's a lot easier to find these guys now, and connect with them. So, before the podcast I did before you was one for my own channel, which is on Danny Morrison. And I basically said to Danny, look, I really just want to talk to you about the fact that you were one of the worst batters in history, but you once opened the batting in a test match. If you could explain to me, if you explain to me how that happened. And it's like, if you think about it, the way that cricket writing used to be, you had to be at the ground. Then the player had to be at the ground. You might have been able, if you're lucky in a Western country, you might have been able to look them up in a phone directory, or you might have been able to go to your gymkhana or something, or maybe they were coaching somewhere. And it's like, now you're just like, maybe they're on LinkedIn. Oh, they are on LinkedIn. Great. I'd like to chat to you about this thing. And I think that that's how I found Asif Karim. This Asif Karim basically had, I'm trying to remember, was a 19-year Kenyan cricket career.
Yeah.
And he's famous for one spell of bowling against Australia in a lost game. And I contacted him, know nothing about him. And it turns out that he's been keeping basically a living diary of himself his whole life, waiting for someone to come and tell his life story. And I think at the time that I contacted him, he was about to get a documentary made on himself. He was about to release a book on himself. And I was just like, mate, just give me everything you have and I will put it together. And what this guy played in the Junior French Open as a kid. He then went to, I'm trying to remember the university, but one of the famous universities on the East Coast of America, to play tennis. He played Davis Cup for Kenya, and then he had this incredible cricket career on the side of that. And I remember talking to Steve James, the English cricketer who became a cricket journalist. And I said, you faced this guy. And he said, Jared, do you really think I'm going to remember some random left arm finger spinner? And it's like that. I'm not having a go at Steve James. He's right. Like, he doesn't remember him. But for people like us, for whatever reason, we make this connection with them, right? And then that's it. We're like, We're in. This is our guy. Asif Karim is there. I just happened to be in the ground the day he bowled that spell to Australia. And I was like, for the rest of my life, if I said casually to one of my friends, Asif Karim, they'd be like, what a spell. Because they were there. They felt it, right? And that's what it is.
It's, I think, you mentioned Asif Karim, and one person who comes to mind is Douglas Murray.
Yeah.
I mean, that was because it's so bizarre, because it was literally that year where suddenly we are like, who is this guy doing the scoop and taking Yorkers and turning them to fours? And then he just completely disappeared. And oddly enough, that sort of the whiff of the fact that he had done this sort of persisted for a considerable period of time. And a lot of people were like, hey, yeah, this is another way to deal with this situation. So I don't even know where he is or what he does, and specifically with Zimbabwe cricket the way it is, and has been for a while now. Yeah.
No, there's lots of guys like that who just have disappeared off the face of the earth. There's a couple of players I'm trying to get hold of at the moment, and it's just like, if they don't join Facebook, right? The other former teammates don't know where they are. And there was one player where, for a long time, his teammates kept saying to me, "I think he's dead. I think he just died." And he wasn't that old. He would be about 50, and then one day he just showed up in the change rooms at a Big Bash game, asking to see his friend, and literally no one had seen him in 20 years, and those sorts of things happen. And these guys have these incredible stories, and I think that's and I just get sucked in by them. The weirder the story, the more unlikely the hero, the more likely I am to be absolutely fixated with them.
There's one guy I was fixated by for a long time, and I still think he was a really, really good bowler, was Praveen Kumar. Because Praveen Kumar used to get the ball to talk. He was basically Bhuvaneshwar Kumar 1.0, and all the rest, as people have pointed out. But what an interesting story, because I think he had issues with temper, but he was supposed to be a really fun guy off the field, and his teammates used to love hanging out with him, and they're like, oh, he's the funniest guy in this thing. And then he just disappeared, and he and specifically, I think he's from Meerut, if I'm not mistaken. And there was an article, I don't know who did, on Cricinfo, where he spoke about suffering from mental health, and how, as a sports person from that place, this is completely alien to everybody. Because it's not, let alone anybody in any non-cricket or non-famous person talking about this. Is somebody who's famous, and people who think that the cliche thing, right, which is that, what do you have to be depressed about? You've had it all that nonsense. So I was already fascinated by him before that happened, and then that happened. I was like, oh, this is an interesting man, and I hope he's fine. This is a great story. I used to love that one series he bowled against Australia. Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah, the man with the perfect wrist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shishant too, right? Wasn't Shishant the other one who they said was a perfectness? Or the perfect release?
Did they both go through MRF, I think, didn't they? So at that stage, they were sort of making them almost perfect sort of... I know Shishant certainly did. They're making them sort of perfect. Look, Praveen, he talked about it. I didn't realize recently how close he was to taking his own life. No one, I don't think anyone's probably quite nailed the Andre Nell story. So Andre Nell tried to take his own life, and very similar cricketers, weren't they? And Srisanth didn't try and take his own life, but had his own battles. You see them on the field living these perfect lives, and then you realize all the stuff that goes into it. And, having to work with cricketers as I have over the last few years, there's a lot going on that is just that doesn't always make it out, and eventually they release it when they're much older, and you're like, well, if you were releasing this stuff early on, it wouldn't be burning you, it wouldn't be getting to you. But yeah, it's those sorts of characters are just endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, Andre Nell, I mean, like and he spoke about this. By the way, I just, if you have the chance, please read Jared's interview with Srisan, because I read it again today. I remember reading it when he had released it ages back, and it's literally, there's an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee where Jerry Seinfeld meets Michael Richards. And it is one of those bizarre episodes because it looks like, as Jerry mentions up top, that this is staged. And your interview with Srisan reminded me of that. Because I mean, this did not happen. There's a dog who gets stuck, and Srisan with a wooden axe rescues him, and it's amazing.
It was such a bizarre. I mean, he's such a bizarre character when you meet him, and like before that, I could tell everything about him from the fact that he was happy that he made me wait, right? He was happy that someone was still waiting for him, right? A random Gora journalist was like happy to wait for him in the reception of his gym. And then he tried to use me to get a discount at the gym by saying, look, this man's going to write about you. And the fact that I worked that out, even though he was, I think he was talking in I'm not actually, can't remember what language it would have been, but it was down in Kerala, wasn't it? So, he was such a ridiculous character from beginning to end. And even the way he messages you, like when you get a WhatsApp, it's like there's no pattern to it other than the fact that I'll send him like 3 or 4 WhatsApps and I won't get anything back. And then one day I'll get like 40. Just this and that is Srisan. He just worked. I mean, remember we were in the car and he said, see that spot over there? I vomited there once. I mean, okay. And then he tells me the story, but he doesn't tell me the story and then go, and that's where I vomited. He literally starts with, I vomited there. And then you look at him weirdly and he goes, okay, let me tell you why I vomited there, right? It's such a, those sorts of people, and you find them in cricket everywhere. Like Danny Morrison, I was talking to him about his commentary today, and he explaining his theatre background. I didn't know Danny Morrison had a theatre background. I'd never prodded that part of Danny Morrison before, and you're just like, that explains a lot about Danny Morrison. He's probably watched a lot of vaudeville or Auckland comedy, and the RRs and all that. You see it. It all comes together. And I think that one thing I learned very, very early on, I did a documentary on my father when he turned 50 or 60. Must have been 60, I think. And I did a documentary on him. And you go and talk to his family and his friends and all these sorts of people. And you realize my old man's a pretty straight guy, you don't get a lot out of him when you chat to him unless he's had a couple of beers. And you realize that even someone like him, that the sort of weird path that he's had to become the person he is. And I think that's something that I've really tried to work on. And then when you come across an absolutely ridiculous human being like Srisan, or I'd love to do Praveen Kumar one day. I'd love someone like Sunil Narayan, who is like almost, he's one of the shyest cricketers I think in the world. I would love to just sit with him and just chat to him about stuff. And there's all these different people and their different paths, and you realize just how endlessly fascinating all that sort of stuff is.
Yeah, I mean, with Sunil Narayan and Varun Chakravarti and Ajanta Mendes and a bunch of these mystery spinners, they just seem like they're unfazed by all of it. And then you just realize, like, there's a very high chance that they're just a little shy. They want to express themselves like everybody else.
No, exactly. Well, one of my favorite stories a couple of years ago was, when I got into analytics, you do all this analytics and like players pop out and you're just like, who's this guy? Like, I don't know much about this guy other than their name. And one of them was Benny Howe. And Benny Howe just absolutely, in the blast, is unplayable. He played a couple of years of the Bangladesh Premier League. No one's ever hit him. But because he bowls about 72 miles an hour, no one picks him up. But he basically bowls spin, but a little bit faster than a normal spinner, right? But it looks like a medium pacer. So everyone goes, he's just bowling rubbish. Anyway, so I go and meet him and say, explain to me what you do. And his whole cricket personality comes from the fact he has ADHD, right? And he basically, when another cricketer, so there's a famous story in basketball. Everyone in basketball knows that the best way to shoot a 3-throw is underhanded, right?
Oh, okay.
Right? Because you put more backspin on the ball, you can control the ball better. No one does it. because it would make you look like a grandma, right? I think they even call it a granny shot, right? And so I think there's a famous basketball. I think it was Rick Barry. I think I've got the name right. Who did it? And there's been a couple of basketballers who've done it. But like you have entire NBA players whose careers are limited by the fact they can't shoot a normal free throw and they won't just do this other method. Benny Howell, because his whole life he's been different. People just said, well, you're either a spinner or a quick bowler. And he's just like, I don't know, maybe I could just do both. And he's just like watching baseball and watching the pitches and all this stuff. And he goes, why couldn't I just do that in cricket? And he just goes off and creates a medium pace bowling style that no one has ever done before, right? And it's all because he has always been different. He's always been the person on the outside. He's always been the person who says the thing that stops the room, and all that sort of stuff. And he just leaned into it with cricket. So he went from being, basically, he was a batter. He's made double centuries in first-class cricket. And in T20 cricket, he's a bowler. And completely different. And you realize that these little ticks and different parts of things really, that's how people work. And it's what sort of gets you going. And it doesn't matter if you're talking to someone like Colin Ingram, and Colin Ingram's just a normal, straight, white South African male, from the East Coast, normal sort of guy. But Colin Ingram comes from a family of farmers, and he's like, his whole thing is about the work. I have to put more work into everyone else. I have to do this. And sometimes he gets so focused by the work that he forgets that he just has to hit sixes, right? Then he gets obsessed by the fact that he has to hit sixes and he hits a bunch. And it's just like, watching him explain his mental process is so interesting. And, and all these different cricketers, and you would have it with your comedy, and I have it with my writing, and all these different things. And you just get absolutely fixated with how people sort of get up in the morning and what they think about. And it doesn't matter if it's, Alistair Cook, and it doesn't matter if it's Ben Dunk. Everyone has these sorts of processes and the things that drive them. And it really is, it's brilliant to be able to allow people to have them or to work them out yourself and to be like, oh, look at this. I wonder if this is why this person does this.
Yeah, it's all of these stories are amazing. By the way, the Danny Morrison thing we got to talk about right after I take these chats. A lot of people popping in. Again, let's get the views up to about 1,000. We've got likes to about 500. Let's get that up to 1,000 because, again, YouTube algorithms have to be defeated. Okay, I'll take a couple of super chats which are popping in. I'll try and get as many super chats as we can. By the way, Danny Morrison was supposed to come on my show and he couldn't because he had internet issues. And I had done all this insane research about him, which is literally the opening batsman, opening bowler thing and all the rest of that stuff. And he was at a hotel where you weren't allowed to break the bio bubble. So he wasn't getting the internet and he couldn't get anybody in to repair it.
I promise you, I just did a video with him. It is very low res where he's staying at the moment. The audio's a bit choppy, but I thought it was a good chance to get him on and chatting about it. And because I'm doing this big project on New Zealand opening batters in Test cricket, which again, not something that sounds great, but trust me, it's one of the fun.
It sounds superb.
It's one of I was saying to Danny today, I don't think I've ever found a more weird bunch of people that have ever done one thing and been connected by something so random as opening the batting for New Zealand in Test matches. But get him on. But he's on a beach in the Maldives, so good luck with your internet quality.
Yeah, he got lucky with the Chinese rocket not landing anywhere near him. Okay, so we have a super chat popping in. Lots of people asking about. Siddharth Singh is explaining who you are. Jared is a cricket writer. Okay, I'm going to explain. Jared Kimber is a cricket writer. He's got a YouTube channel, which is awesome. If you're a cricket fan, please head there. And I would say listen to the interview with Harsha Bhogle. The one with Abhinav Mukund was superb as well. Steve Hummerson was great. And the 2 episodes that you did, one was with about Neil Wagner, which is great. Okay. And we're going to be talking about the IPL shortly because there's just so much to talk about with cricket that you get distracted. We will talk about it. Ritvik Malik has a question. He asks, can you please ask Jared Kimber where he gets his stats from?
Yeah, from a bunch of places, to be fair. Andrew Sampson, who's probably one of the most famous cricket statisticians in the world, who works for BBC and the TV companies in South Africa. He has a database that he's collected. So I get a lot from him. I've also got some of my own stuff that I get. I use Crick Sheets a couple of times when I have to. So if anyone wants their stats, go out to Crick Sheets. But I'm also lucky enough to have worked with Crick Info, and so they have access to a lot of good stuff. But I think most of my stat stuff is a combination of begging, borrowing, and stealing as much as possible to try and bring it together. I certainly don't have I don't have the most definitive stats in the world, but I know how to find what I need more often than not.
Okay, we have Bhargav BS who says, was recently watching T20 game highlights where Rob Nicol was doing well for New Zealand. Could ball off spin and bat at the top. Wonder where he is. Isn't he still around? Is he still? No, he's not around.
Oh, I'd have to have a look. I mean, he wasn't that far away a couple of years ago. He's one of those really good prospects. I think New Zealand has just sort of exploded as a T20 factory over the last little while. And I think that if anything else, he maybe went away. But one thing I've noticed with New Zealand cricket is because New Zealand cricket is so amateur, if you're not doing the circuit, you kind of drop off a little bit. So there's a really interesting cricketer. I don't know if you'd even know who he is, but his name is Anton Devcic. Has you ever come across him? So he's another one that came out of the algorithms. And I remember talking to New Zealand players going, this guy wasn't even playing much a couple of years ago and wasn't doing anything. And now I think one year he had an average of 30 and a strike rate of 155 opening the batting. And he was bowling as well. And then a couple of years later, he dropped off again. And I think that does happen in New Zealand. You got to remember, when was it? It wasn't that long ago that they actually started being paid as professionals in the domestic game there. They are a long way behind even places like South Africa when it comes to it. So it does mean that I think at times, if you're not playing international cricket or franchise cricket, you can just disappear and you have to actually get one of those jobs that people talk so much about.
Yeah, it seems like the best cricket circuits are probably I mean, as a cricketer, if you're from the top from the bottom till the top, is probably India, England, and Australia, and maybe is Pakistan up there as well, or what do you think?
No, Pakistan. If you're a domestic cricketer, you basically want to be in England or Australia. I think India is getting there, but it's still. I don't know. I think if you're a domestic cricketer in Australia, you're on a good enough wage that you feel like a professional.
Right.
If you're a domestic cricketer in England, maybe it's not quite at the same level of a wage, although sometimes it can be roughly the same. But again, you can feel like a professional. I think in some of the other, even in India, you might still feel that you're a bit semi-professional. And that depends on your background, of course. If you're middle class, you probably think it's semi-professional. And if you're one of the poor people, you probably think, this is awesome. People are paying me to play cricket.
Yeah.
And I think if you look around the world, there's a lot of that sort of middle ground, if you know what I mean, where it's just it's very hard to dedicate all of your time to being a professional cricketer in domestic cricket around the world. And it's something we don't talk about enough. T20 cricket's actually really helped with that, I think.
Yeah.
If you have the ability, there's more money in T20 franchises at home. And if you do play overseas, it can be quite lucrative, even if it's just for a short period of time. Like if you're a South African and you're playing in a tournament in, Canada or something, and you get $25,000 for that, that's not a huge amount of money from what you can earn in cricket, but it's huge if you're a South African and that's your off season. Suddenly someone's just given you $25,000. And I know the West Indian guys, some of their salaries in the CPL are really low, and they're like, no, this is great. I don't have to get a job for the rest of the year, sort of thing. So it can be real tough, and it's something that holds cricket back. You see it more so with the women cricketers. That's why so many women cricketers have part-time jobs. They can't even devote themselves enough to the national side, let alone their domestic side.
Well, it's apparently the same scene in tennis as well, right? I think there was some research done where they said that barring the top tier players, everybody else essentially has to have a second job. There's no way to finance the entire thing, because to have a coach, to have the training staff, to have a fitness thing, and you need all the dietitians, you need all of the rest of that. I was speaking to Somdev Devarman, who was an Indian tennis player. And I think just to prepare for the Olympics, he, I think, needed $100,000. Yeah. Which is absurd. And so I'm like, I think it's tough across quite a few sports, including cricket. I mean,
I think once you go out of that sort of the American sports and football, I think when you go away, if you think about it, if you're not one of the top hockey players in your country, you probably have a proper job, don't you? And yet, hockey in Australia and India and Pakistan, it's not a small sport. We all get sucked in if there's a medal involved, but the rest of the year, it's just a primary school teacher, right? And I think that is the case. And cricket is the way that it's spread is certainly the case. And tennis and golf. So tennis was the only sport I was actually ever good at. And a lot of my friends did go on to try and become professionals. And most of them ended up being coaches, because you end up spending most of your time in a Shanghai hostel, eating noodles and turning up to play in some semi-sanctioned tournament, losing in the first round and then hoping you make the second round of the doubles sort of thing.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is covering your costs. And it's a brutal environment. And funnily enough, recently I became friends with a golfer in America, and he was telling me the same thing. He ended up, he left golf to go and work in the police force. And he's like, I made twice the amount of money working in the police force in America than I did being a professional golfer. And he goes, and I wasn't bad. It's just that I wasn't in the top 100. And that's what it is.
I mean, maybe he's in the top 200 cops right now, which is still good. Never know. But I mean, this reminds me exactly of stand-up, right? Like, or even as a writer, like as a freelancer of any sort, essentially, if you don't have a salaried job, you're relatively fucked most of the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
being a freelance, anything sucks.
Yeah. Okay, we have Vamsi Krishna who asks, what on earth happened to Kevin Cooper? He used to be a sought-after commodity in T20s with the slow off-cutters. Who's Kevin Cooper? Was the Irish guy?
No, Kevin Cooper was, is he from Trinidad? I think he's from Trinidad. He was one of the West Indians that came over in when they all got excited. And yeah, he's an incredible bowler. In fact, I want to do more on him, because he went from being a really good IPL bowler to not even being that good in the CPL in a very short space of time. He actually bowled a lot like Benny Howe, I think, but probably a slightly different version of that. But yeah, he's a really fascinating cricketer. I've got to work out who his agent was. I think I know who his agent was. I don't think he's with him anymore, sadly. But yeah, another fascinating thing. Those sorts of guys, we're going to see that more and more, I think, in the IPLs. The IPL becomes a very, very, what's the best way of putting it? As it becomes the sort of apex league, I think you're going to have periods where you have a Kevin Cooper come up, play really well, and then people are going to work him out and he's just going to disappear very quickly. Right. These sort of, these flare-up careers are going to happen a lot. And he's certainly one. And it'd be very interesting to see if we get more and more medium pacers who essentially are kind of like combinations between medium pace and spin, be very successful around the world. My guess is that we will, and that Kevin Cooper will be one of the early ones that we remember.
Yeah, I mean, now that I see his face, I recognize who he is. Yeah. And his IPL record is pretty good, actually. In fact, it's damn good. 25 matches and average economy of under 8, and he's got an average of 22. That's pretty damn good.
And he's not. This is the thing, and they just disappear. These guys. Yeah. That's a huge problem with West Indies cricket in general. That they don't manage to keep their players around. So Adrian Barath made 100 against Australia when he was 20. Right. And he was obviously at that stage quite young. And I think he ended up averaging 25 in Test cricket. But it's like he didn't play a Test after he was 24. We don't even know how good he was or could be. And that's part of the problem with cricket. Like that in a proper environment, that shouldn't happen. That talent should be nurtured and kept around so that when he's 28 and 29 and he's not a 20-year-old idiot, he knows what to do in his life. Like, most people are not successful at 20. At 20, you show promise. At 28, you know what the hell you're doing, hopefully.
No, it's not happened yet. I'm still waiting.
At 58, you know what you're doing.
At about 75, hopefully you have money to retire. But it's so interesting how players get selected, right? I'm sure you're far more privy to this than I am. I was very interested with Abdul Samad for one very simple reason, is that last year when the IPL was being played, he made it a point that each time the captains were discussing something, he would just be around the periphery. And I thought that was very interesting because he's like a young kid. And so they're probably like, what's he doing here? But he's still trying to be there. And I think that's so interesting, right? Like that the things that could trigger you to be part of a squad could be like, because if your cricketing talent is equal to, say, the next person, you might get selected because people just like you.
I remember quite early on in their careers, Phil Hughes and Usman Khawaja, they, one of the coaching stuff, I don't know if it was Mickey Arthur or one of the assistant coaches, and it wasn't Mickey Arthur, it might have been one of the assistant coaches, and they were saying that Usman Khawaja and Phil Hughes were as good as other options that they had in the team, all right? But they couldn't field, and they didn't bring anything to the group. They didn't come up with strategies. They didn't encourage other play. And it was only because they were young. They weren't saying that, I mean, Usman Khawaja's gone on to be quite a good captain. Sadly, Phil Hughes, never got to that point in his life. But they were just what they were trying to say is that there are other things, especially cricket is so weird because it's this personal sport within a team group. And so you want to pick the best batter, but you also want someone who can field slips, right? Yeah. You also want someone who can run up to, Mitchell Johnson and be like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but this batter's doing this right now, right? Little things like that are all really important. And you see it quite a lot that especially the more gifted younger batters sometimes have trouble with that, right? Because they don't need to learn any of that other stuff. Right? Why would they? They're already better at what they do. They're smacking cover drives, left, right, and center. And you sometimes see it with those more flawed players that they have the ability. I mean, when they call Mike Hussey Mr. Cricket, that burns me. It's like Mike Hussey likes the sport of cricket and he's good at cricket. I understand, and you and I both know this, that there are many cricketers who don't particularly like the game. They just happen to be really, really talented at it. And you would get it in comedy. You certainly get it in writing. You get it right across the board. We're all used to it. It's like Mike Hussey was penalized for liking the thing he was good at and being fascinated by it, right? By his teammates. And realistically, the reason I think he loved cricket naturally, but also he wasn't very good when he was 20. There's this whole narrative about Mike Hussey that Australian cricket was so good he was knocking on the door. No, he wasn't. In his 20s, he was dropped from the Western Australian team. That's how bad Mike Hussey was going at one stage, right? But Mike Hussey, because he cared enough, he kept learning, he kept listening, he kept talking to people. He badgered all those people that went on to call him a nerd, right? And then what Mike Hussey did? He burned their asses down, right? And so you see those sorts of people out there, and so you've actually got to respect that at a certain point. What else can you bring to this thing? And it's a perfect example of, as a writer, the reason I started making videos is I was a filmmaker, and my filmmaking career didn't go anywhere, so I became a writer. And me and Sam Collins, when we first went to Crick Info, well, before we went to Crick Info, we were covering the 10-11 Ashes. And we looked at the list of the English journalists who are going to be coming out there. And it was something like 47 people, right? It was ridiculous how many people were traveling for the Ashes. And we're like, how the hell is anyone going to find any of our work, right? How are they going to work out that we're any good? And we're just like, well, we'll just do something different. We'll do video. And you realize how something as simple as that has, completely changed my career. And you do stand out when you do stuff like that. And I think that, it's exactly the same with, you're talking about a young player in the IPL. It's like, I want to join the leadership group. It's like, but you're 21 and you've never played at this level before. I know, but can I just sit in on the meetings? Or I remember there was I'm trying to think, one of the young cricketers I worked with, and I've now forgotten who it was, but he said to me, can you send me the information? Can you send me all the information on the bowling group? Right. And I went, but you're a batter. And he said, yeah, I just want to know. So when I'm out in the field, maybe I can help the captain. And I was like, this kid, this is a guy who's going somewhere. And it's like, just simple things like that you could do in life, let alone in sport, to make yourself stand out a little bit. Because realistically, a lot of people are talented. Do you know what I mean? You talk to any top level cricket, the best one, Shane Warne. Shane Warne will tell you that at the same time he was playing cricket for Victoria, he wasn't the most talented leg spinner. There's a guy called Craig Howard, who was incredible. Craig Howard's one of my heroes when I was growing up. I absolutely loved Craig Howard. Craig Howard had said this before, he didn't have the brain of Shane Warne. He didn't have the ferocity of Shane Warne. He eventually didn't have the body. He wasn't as strong as Shane Warne. Shane Warne goes on to take 700 test wickets, and Craig Howard ends up being an off spinner, which is the worst thing that can ever happen to a leg spinner.
Yeah. I remember, I think when Steve Smith was practicing, I think in the middle of the Ashes or something, and the commentators were like, we saw Steve Smith in the nets, and he was practicing off spin. Steve, don't go to the dark side. And I'm like, I agree. Please, pull leg spin. The risk factor, the result factor is way more exciting than off spin pitch. I don't think, this is why, unless there's somebody like a Moeen Ali or Nathan Lyon, so I've never understood, for example, and I still really like him as a cricketer. I've never understood how Washington Sundar is so effective. Because as a TV viewer, you're just watching I barely turned. But obviously there's more to it. There's pace, there's height, there's all of that, but you can't see it.
I think Gideon Haigh years ago wrote that off-spin is cricket's rubbish skill. And his way of explaining that was not that it's not an art form in itself, because clearly it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Ashwin has proved, if nothing else, that it's an art form. But basically, that no one has ever looked at off spin and not thought to themselves, I could do that. You know what I mean? Like everyone looks at it and goes, whereas leg spin, it's just like, could be a double bouncer, could be a head high full toss. Bowling fast. Not only am I not athletic enough to bowl fast, look at the strain these guys are putting themselves through. Off spin, look at Chris Gale. It's 2 steps and you whip your arm over a little bit. And it's basically, I'm just opening a door. Yeah? Just opening a door. I can do this.
You know, it's so interesting that you mentioned this, because for the longest time, the big grouse of Indian cricket fans has been that can't none of these 5 guys at the top of the batting order bowl? Right? Because you've seen off spinners and you've seen like, okay, there's not much. And then you've seen some, like I saw Shikhar Dhawan bowling, and I think he got called out for chucking. The 1 over he bowled in Test match cricket, and then Virat slipped over. So you're like, listen, we don't want you to break your leg over trying to bowl, like fill up 3 overs in the middle. So you can sort of sense why that is. Okay, we still have a lot of super chats popping in. Kevin Cooper question is done. Shreyas Andi, by the way, again, watching the list, let's get this likes up to 1,000. Okay, where are we? Shreyas Andi says, I feel the best debut series for an Indian bowler was Bhuvi versus Pakistan. And Jared, do you think the Australian cricket team have lost their spark, and talk about WTC?
I mean, that's a lot of questions in one. I think Bhuvi's incredible. I don't really understand why he's not on money in India.
Yep.
Just a next level talent, especially as an IPL bowler, but also as a test bowler. I understand the need for pace, but also understand that Jimmy Anderson seems pretty handy. Has Australia lost their spark? No, I think Australia got tired in that last series because they kept bowling the same bowls over again, and India did. You know, I wrote all series about how India were trying to dull the Australian bowlers, and everyone kept telling me I was wrong until the end when it happened. It was quite clear. They came in with a very clear batting plan, and they did it. I think that Australia clearly can't bat the way that they used to bat. That's just obvious. But when you have Mitchell Starc, Pat Cummins, Josh Hazlewood, when James Pattinson can't get in your side, when Nathan Coulter-Nile will probably end up having played a handful of tests, I think you realize that they are not going to struggle to. I mean, Billy Stanlake has still not done anything in cricket. Billy Stanlake is fucking tall and fucking fast. And do you know how many people have ever been those two things? It's not like a normal thing to be. And so I think Australia will continue to win tests and series because of that, but they'll also lose a lot because their batters won't make many runs. And I think that's just these things go in cycles, I think, at certain points. And then World Test Championship, looking forward to it. I mean, it's going to be good fun, isn't it? I'm hoping to get down there. And it's not too far from my house, so I might be able to drive down there and pop in for a little bit. But yeah, it's obviously a flawed format and it's a bit nuts, but it's a cool thing that we'll be able to watch and tweet about. And isn't that what cricket really is about?
Yeah, it's nuts that you fly across continents to play one test. Like that's you're out. This makes no sense.
Yeah, it's perfect. You know, ruining the environment to play one test that we may never do again because it may not work, and so we might abandon the series. Let's remember the very last time we tried to do a World Test Championship was one of the worst things of all time. It was in 1911, and then we ended up with the ICC from it. So, you know, I'm just saying we don't have great form on trying this, but let's give it a go.
I have a slightly strange question to ask you. You spoke about the exhaustion levels of the Aussie bowlers, and like as somebody who's not a cricket expert, even I could sense that was happening because I'm like, you do this a whole 1.5 tests left, and you're already looking really tired. Now, one of the things, do you think that the Amazon Prime Aussie thing, do you think it showed their hand a bit? Like it revealed tactics in any way where they seemed tired by the end of it, and the Indian batsmen, after seeing that again, it sort of reiterated the plan that this is going to work as a tactic to just tire the Aussie bowlers out.
Well, it's funny you talk about the test because if you look at what they did in the Ashes, they did something different. They actually rested and rotated their bowlers heaps when they came to England. Now, they did that not just because of resting. They also did it because of conditions. Once they went to Australia and they decided they were just going to use those 4 bowlers. And I think part of this was they thought Cameron Green was going to be better with the ball. He's going to get wickets and they'd be able to give him the ball more. And when he didn't get wickets and he just couldn't hit a length, could he? I think that caused them problems. So I'm not sure that the test did that, but I think once it was clear that they weren't going to rest Cummins, right?
Yeah.
They probably weren't going to rest Hazelwood. And Stark should not have played in the last two tests. Like he had to rest from one of those. He was clearly, and so once they made that decision as well, I think that's when India had to know that they had the upper hand at that point. Up until then, they probably didn't know what they were doing was going to work again, or work that well. But realistically, it'd be very interesting to see now if anyone ever does that again, because it wasn't like they belted Hazelwood or Cummins out of the attack. Like they had to really fight against those guys, and they still ended up with really good records in that series. But I think there is a certain point now where we are learning more about loads and how long to keep them in. If you look at England when they got to world number one in, what was it, 2011, they basically went, if we just tire out every bowling attack in the world, we're going to win, right? And until they got to Asia, that worked for them, really. They got to Asia and they had to change their plans a little bit. But realistically, that's what they did. They tired out teams, and it's like, it's quite a simple way of doing it. Now, what do you need? England would love to do that now. It's just that everyone in England has now opened the batting once, right? And not everyone has bloody Pujara, do they? Do you know what I mean? Most people don't have that sort of resource available to them. But you will see, I think, more and more teams will try and do that, because I think it's a really, really good tactic. The one thing that, he should attack more, he should rotate the strike more. And it's like, yeah, if you're not him, you should do that, because you're not very good at it. If you're the best blocker of the ball in the world and you can tire out the best bowler in the world, you should do that. And I think that is what Cook, Strauss, and Trott did back in the day. That is what England opening batters did for generations, realistically. And there are other ways to play cricket as well. It's not like that's the only way. Gordon Greenidge and Desmond Haynes played in a different style. Justin Langer and Matthew Hayden played in a different style. But as a general rule, if you can let me tell you one of my favorite stories in cricket, and I hope this is true. George Headley, right? Who was one of the greatest batters we have ever had in our game. He would... Once he got set and he'd been batting for a little while, right, he would start to hit the ball where the bowlers were, right? So if they put him at fine leg, he would shuffle across his crease and hit the ball to backward square leg. So the bowler would have to run around, field the ball, come back, do it again, right? He's facing the spinner, and there's a long on out. He would hit the ball wide of long on. So again, this poor bowler had to run around. His whole thing was, the more tired I can make bowlers, the better. We've always known it. The difference is that teams are now committing to it in this analytic age of just like, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take this many balls on the body. That was the big Faf du Plessis thing, wasn't it? Back in the day with South Africa, where he said to South Africa, we can win every test at home if we just make these pitches spicy as hell, right? But we're going to have to take a lot of balls on the body. All of you are going to average about 30 for the next 5 years, and you're all going to have broken fingers and broken ribs, but we'll win a bunch of tests. And I think that, teams are just committing to those sort of more extreme methods now.
Which is great. I mean, I it took me a long time to reconcile with that 2-day test match, where initially I was like, this is not, no, come on, man. And then I was like, okay, maybe this is great. And I think a lot of people called it out. I don't know what your opinion on this is. I'm sure you've spoken about this before, but there was a lot of India batted equally badly in that first innings, as did England. And it should have at least gone to the third day at a minimum. Yeah. And I like the spicy pitch. Okay. So we have a couple of, by the way, I genuinely think that this WTC is going to be, I want to see who faces more balls, and it's going to be two unpredictable players. One is, of course, Cheteshwar Pujara. The second is BJ Watling, who that dude is one of the undersung, is that a word? Unsung heroes of Test cricket over the last couple of years, because he just keeps on batting, and it's especially for a guy who comes lower, around the middle order, it's got to be quite frustrating as a bowler. This guy, what the fuck?
He basically bats like a really dour opening batsman, but number 6. It's great.
Yeah, it's super.
He's invented a position for himself that is mental.
Yeah,
I love it.
Okay, we have a couple of chats. Ibrahim Abhishek, thanks for your super chat, appreciate it. Anubhav Pandey says, "Tum bahut mast kaam karte ho, Saurabh bhai," which means Saurabh, you're doing a great job. Appreciate it, brother. Thanks a lot. And Pratik Menon says, "Valthati, my favorite spotlight to nowhere tale thoughts." Paul Valthati, the Indian cricketer who I think hit was it the first century in the IPL or something, or the fastest, something like that he did. and then he just completely disappeared from the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the IPL, it's almost, as I was saying before, it's almost like a factory to make those sorts of players.
Yeah.
You can pick a player from nowhere who has a bit of mystery to them we don't know anything about them. They sort of get thrown in, they do something great, but over a league, they get found out quicker as well. Do you know what I mean? Like it's harder for them to keep it up. And so, whether it be Ajanta Mendes or, anyone like that, I think we'll get a lot of mystery bowlers, but we'll probably get a lot of batters who come in and just smash a bunch of runs in their first half of a season, maybe even the first couple of games, and then they'll disappear. And my guess is that those sorts of players have incredible backstories. And do you remember one of my favorite? And I'm trying to remember, where did he come up recently? But MS Ghoni. Do you remember?
Yeah. Manpreet Dhoni, he came in that road safety tournament.
Was he playing in that? Is that where I saw him again recently?
Yeah.
And like, remember that at one stage he was the most talked about person in the world. Did he not have a daughter who was like born undersized or something? Yeah. Was it stillborn? Was it? And there was like a photo of him with her, and then he'd come from nowhere. He had a name that sounded like another cricketer, but wasn't quite another cricketer. Like everything was going on with him, and it's just like, all right, we're done with him. Turn the light off, and he's gone. And those sorts of things just happen all the time.
And it's also, I'm assuming that this is like, I mean, you played great cricket, and you played like cricket at a higher level than that as well. Like I'm assuming that once you go to the next level, and then you're like, hey, I've made it, and then you very quickly find out that, oh shit, I have not. Like that fall's gotta be that's gotta be a tough thing to take, where you're suddenly back from playing for Australia or England or India, and then you're suddenly back playing for 38 people and a cat.
Yeah.
Like that's got to be quite debilitating for your confidence for a lot of players.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that you realize is, I remember talking to Mark Butcher, and I was doing a project with him that I still haven't finished, but it's really, really interesting project where, and I was talking about him about his greatest failure. And like, he averaged 36, 37 in Test cricket. So he had a lot of failure in his career, despite the fact he was a very talented player. Part of the reason he had a lot of failure is he was picked way before he was ready. He was basically, I think he had like he started his career, as a bowler, had like 2 years making runs, and they put him into the Test team because they were going badly. He needed someone to make runs, right? And he's out in the West Indies, and he's facing Curtly Ambrose and Courtney Walsh, right? And he's just like, I should not be here. I'm not good enough to be here, right? And you don't realize how often players just don't feel that way. So there's a really good young West Indian cricketer who I don't think is going to make it now, right? He must be, I'm trying to remember his age, but he's still mid-20s, right? And I know this guy quite well. And everyone who knows him would say that talent-wise, there's no problem. Right. But two things haven't dropped for him. One, he hasn't worked out what he has to do to work on his game to make sure that he's a consistent run scorer. And the other one is he doesn't believe he's good enough to do it. Right. And this guy, people, again, that's what I was talking about before. People are that Shane Warne, Craig Howard story. People are going to talk about this guy. Some successful cricketer is going to be like, you thought I was good. You should have seen this guy. Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them out there, and you see, you would know it in stand-up comedy, and I'm a perfect example of a failed stand-up comic, right? I tried it once, and I realized straight away that I liked writing it, and I didn't like performing it, right? So I never did it before, and I didn't know at that stage that you could have a career writing jokes for other people. Otherwise, I would have just done that. That would have been my career. I didn't know. I just thought a stand-up comedian was someone who wrote jokes, got up, and performed them. I didn't realize there's this whole other industry. But perfect example of, clearly, I had enough talent to be able to do that and could have made something of it. But I just went straight away. I went, I do not belong up here. This is not for me, right? And just left it. You see those sorts of people in sport all the time. And it's just like, there are people who bowl really fast. There are people who hit the ball a long way. If they don't believe it, it doesn't matter how many people tell them they're good. It either drops for them or it doesn't. And I think that sort of stuff happens a lot. And you can make 100 in the IPL and still not feel like you are good enough. And, Mitchell Johnson is one of the greatest cases of this of all time. And I'd love to sit him down one day and just like get him to chat about this. But you're talking about a man who bowled as fast as any left-arm bowler ever, who probably had the most destructive summer of anyone in modern cricket, right? And up until that point, I don't think he thought he was good enough to play Test cricket, right?
Right.
what a ridiculous situation that is. But it's really common and it happens all the time.
Yeah, but it's also interesting about the trigger, right? Like Mitchell Johnson bowling in the Ashes is, I mean, you can't, like, over the last decade, I'm assuming even longer, you can't come across a better consistent bowling performance, at least like from a visual perspective. Like forget the number of wickets taken and all the rest of the stuff. That visual spectacle of watching just Ekling going like be a fuck from like the time he got the ball in the first test or whatever. But I'm assuming there's got to be a trigger somewhere. Either it's like you had a great season in the domestic circuit, or somebody's told you something, or just like what sparks that at some stage. Is that something that like even in the IPL and the rest? And by the way, you know what? I love the fact that we've spoken for an hour and 10 minutes. I mean, not even touched about the IPL just yet, which is why I love these cricket conversations.
Yeah, I think there is always a moment, but I think if we knew what they were,
Yeah.
we would be able to get them to work also. I remember working with a cricket team a couple of years ago, and one of the commentators come up to me and said, "What's wrong? Like, what's going on?" And I was like, "Well, if I knew that," and it's kind of, and it's kind of, that's kind of true of those sorts of things. Like if we knew how to make Mitchell Johnson feel like he belonged at 20, he would have had one of the greatest careers of any cricketer ever. And instead, he had a great year and a half, and the rest of his career, sometimes he was good, sometimes he was terrible, sometimes he was okay. And those sorts of things are very hard because they work completely differently for other people, don't they? Like not everyone comes to this in the same way. I remember when was it? I'm trying to think. It was around 2015, where at that stage I'd been working as a professional writer for 7 years, and I literally went and was like, I was so terrified that one day I would wake up and not be able to write anymore, that I went and like deconstructed my writing from top to bottom to work out what I did that worked and that didn't work. And it wasn't because I was like, at that stage, I wasn't trying to come up with a writing course or anything, or I wasn't trying to like become a better writer. It was just through I was so terrified that if I suddenly had one bad day of writing, I wouldn't be able to do it anymore. Like I'd get the writing yips. Yeah. And I had to learn every part of my writing so that if one part of my writing fell apart, I could, like a mechanic, just go in and fix it. Just be like this. Right. And so you're talking about, I was 35 at that point, and I've been a professional writer for 7 years and was the senior writer on, the world's biggest cricket website. And I'm still there shitting myself that it's all going to fall apart and I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. Right. So I think that, if I'm doing that, my thing is that when people say, well, what's it like to make it? And I said, look, Tom Cruise probably feels like he's made it, right? The rest of us, unless we're narcissists, just holding on. Yeah. Just holding on. And like, when COVID came, I don't know what happened to your profession, but I basically went from having 1 million jobs to having no jobs. Literally, I applied. What was the funniest job I applied for? I applied to write press releases for a sporting league, and like not a big sporting league, like a small like a domestic sporting league type thing, to write press releases for them, and I didn't get an interview. Right? You realize how quickly it can all fall, right? And some of the other, ridiculous jobs that I applied for during COVID, and I couldn't even get an interview with them. And you do realize that you are, how much it can fall apart if you are not Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is the only person who has, because of Scientology and because of how famous he is, does not believe that. Everyone else is like, oh shit, if my next movie bombs, I'm gone. Yeah. If you don't get 1,000 likes on this video, is that the end? Is it going to trend down? Are YouTube going to do off the algorithm? What if I can't do stand-up comedy in front of a stage, in front of a crowd anymore? All those sorts of things. I think that's a normal part of life. And if you think about it, if you're thinking that when you're already successful, what are the people who are not successful thinking? Do you know what I mean? And I know that because I've had all those thoughts too.
Yep. Oh, it's a, oh my God, it's a massive gamble. Like just to tell yourself that you gotta figure something else out. Yeah. And that thought which persists for like weeks sometimes. And then during like the pandemic, what started happening is you started getting in touch with people where you're like, I'd never do that. And they're like, hey, listen, I want to really do that. And they're like, fuck you. You said no.
Oh yeah, been there.
Okay, we have a couple of. I'll just read these 3 super chats because they're pending for a while, and then we got to get to the IPL. Pratyaksh Trivedi says Pollard catch off Cooper in IPL is the best catch ever. I distinctly remember that. Okay, now I know exactly who Kevin Cooper was. Get it. Dhruv Bhatia says 3 tests for WTC final going forward. Probably makes sense, right? 3 tests? Like from next year onwards or whatever it is.
I think they're probably waiting to see if it's successful. So yeah, that's probably a fair comment.
Yeah.
They might move it to 2 tests, and the top and whoever if it's a draw, the top team wins. But yeah, I would hope that they would move to 3 tests if it ever exists again in the future.
Yeah, which is another doubt. Neeraj Vashist, how are you doing, man? Nice to see you again. Neeraj, Goni is in that list who perform way better while in CSK or under Dhoni's captaincy, but are not able to repeat it in different settings. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like, again, as an Indian cricket fan, right? Like, one of my favorite things was to watch Chahal and Kuldeep just keep tossing the ball up and get hit for a six and toss it even higher and hit planes with a flight and all the rest and just under Dhoni. And then since then, it's just been like a little up and down for both of them.
Well, my favorite thing about MS Dhoni is for anyone who grew up in the 90s and played all those video games where they couldn't use the names of the players. MS Dhoni is absolutely one of the best fake names for MS Dhoni that you could come across for that game. My favorite of all time was always the Zimbabwe cricketer, Brian Vittori. And Vittori was even spelt differently just to get it past the censors. And he was a real cricketer. And you're just like, well, he shouldn't have been. He should have been a fake cricketer on a game in the 90s. But yeah, that was the first reason I ever got interested in MS Dhoni. It wasn't the tragic backstory of his family. It was literally that's a really good 90s cricket name.
My favorite was just playing some really, really shady cricket game on my phone, and it says MS Word E. Like, that is the laziest I've ever seen. To take MS Dhoni and make him MS Word E is amazing. Okay, let's quickly come to a couple of questions I had about the IPL. I was going to ask you. So you are an analyst for a bunch of T20 teams, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been. I did. I've worked for 3 teams as an analyst, which is Melbourne Stars, St. Lucia Stars in Scotland.
Yeah.
But I've done consultancy for a bunch of other clubs and teams and franchises. And I've worked with players and coaches directly as well.
Cool. This is going to be the last like 10, 12 minutes. Okay, so I want to ask you that in this, first of all, I generally don't see how they're going to play the rest of the IPL. Whether in India or abroad, I think the only window they have is like in the middle of IPL 2022. That's the only chance we have to play this. But I got to ask you about this. One thing that I found always, the 2-3 questions that while watching it, and I think you've commented on this before, is that one, I don't understand the tactic of Andre Russell bowling around the wicket across the batsman with a loaded offside field. Why don't people do that more?
So I'm trying to think of who the first bowler I saw. Dwayne Bravo did it, which is probably why Andre Russell did it. Peter Siddle had a really good big bash doing it once. Consistently, I think if you think about the arc of a batter, right, it sort of it goes into that leg side arc, so you can still swing it across the leg side. You also get a bit of a free hit at it at a certain point because it's either on the stumps or outside the stumps, and then it's in your baseball swing. Or it's outside, it's pitching outside leg, so you can't go out LBW, so you can flick it. But I would assume that it should be better than it is. Every time I've looked it up online, I looked up the data. It's terrible, and no one should ever do it.
Oh, is it?
So my question of it is that because people are only doing it as a last choice? Like someone's already hit me for 4 sixes, now I'll come around the wicket. Or whether just someone hasn't nailed it. I 100% understand the idea of it. It's also got a really interesting thing where you should be able to actually bowl around people's legs a little bit at times as well, like as they move across. I think it's a really, really interesting tactic. I would love to work with a bowler who wants to do it and see if you can make it work. Because it's such a bizarre angle. If you do it with a low arm, like who's the young spinner who's got the stupid arm?
Priyam Garg, who's trying to do a Kedar Jadhav.
Yeah, those guys, when they do that low arm, if you think about it, if you come right arm around the wicket, you're basically bowling from off the pitch.
Yeah.
Right? That should be confusing enough to a batter to at least get you a couple of dot balls. But yeah, I'm very fascinated about it. I think it probably needs, my guess is that no one's really practiced it that much, if that makes sense. And so it probably hasn't been tested enough, and then someone does it in a game, and you might get some. You might get a little bit of good results from it, but you won't get it consistently. But it's a fascinating thing. We're going to find bowlers are going to have to come up with more weird things like that to do, I think, going forward.
Or just do what Kevin Cooper did, as you said, and that other guy who you mentioned, which is bowling faster off spin. Who do you think was the most sort of? It's a weird term. Like I thought it was really interesting that Harshal Patel bowling the first time was fast off cutters. I was really interesting. And then as soon as they moved from Chennai, I think Akash Chopra said this when I was speaking to him, that as soon as he moved away from Chennai, his everything went downhill. But who do you think was the bowler that influenced the rest of the bowlers the most? It seems to be Harshal Patel, to just inspire everybody to start bowling it really, really slow, even towards the end, especially the bowlers. Is that true, or do you think it was something else?
No, I think it's been a natural progression in T20 cricket over the last year and a half because so many players can hit the ball over their head.
Yeah.
So if you're bowling at on-pace delivery, you open up that part of the ground, right?
Right. Yeah.
The minute you take all the pace off, they can only really hit you in front, right? And I think that if you have a look, players have stopped playing the scoop because they're just like, there's no point. Because if I get down early and try and scoop it, even if I hit off the middle of the bat, I might not get it over short fine leg or short third man. And I think that maybe what Harshal Patel did was, I think he had the right pitch in the right place. And I think if you go back, I think I said in one of the early videos on that series when you and I both had a sponsor.
Yeah.
I think I was saying on one of those is we don't know how good he is as a bowler yet because he's bowling on a surface where we know the ball's really hard to hit late on, which Chennai was weird. And there was grip there. And that sort of tactic doesn't work when, you bowl on a really good Wankhede pitch or a really good Gabba pitch where people can just stand and hit you a little bit more. But if you take the pace off, at least you are protecting one part of the ground. It's really then hard for them to be able to tickle you and do all those other really, shots. So I'm not surprised. I remember when I was with Scotland in 2019 and we had a player on our team who was really good at playing those shots, but there's a player, and I've forgotten his name, but he plays for the Netherlands. And he got to the point, I want to say it's Max O'Dowd, but maybe I've got the name wrong. I cannot remember his name, but this guy is brilliant at these shots, right? And I was saying, well, if we play against him, why don't we just put third man and fine leg back? They become catching positions. And we just bowl straight and full at him. If he wants to try and hit it past those guys, he's more than welcome to. Clearly, he can't hit down the ground because he's setting up for these shots every time, right?
Yeah.
And if he had that power, he'd be hitting down the ground. And I think that you started to have players who were specializing in only hitting the ball back over their shoulders, right? And bowlers just went, okay, now I'm just going to bowl slow to you. And I'm just going to keep bowling slow to you. And I'll bowl one quick ball and over rather than 3 quick balls and over. And you see these sort of patterns happen all the time. The wide Yorker about 7 years ago was all the rage, right? Everyone had to bowl the wide Yorker. Then everyone started slashing the ball over point for 6 and doing what Virat Kohli did. Everyone stopped bowling the wide Yorker. What did we see this year again? They went back to the wide Yorker. And I think that, if you follow trends in baseball, it's very similar. People get really good at hitting one particular pitch for a while and then it goes away. We've just never had that in cricket because that's not the way that the cricket market has worked. And now it clearly is going that way. And you see these entire trends of players playing one shot and then it just sort of disappears. And I think you'll see that consistently.
Did the tactic work? Did you actually do that tactic against that batsman who just knew how to scoop the ball?
I don't think I think we played when we played against the Netherlands. It absolutely smoked us because we had to beat them for a net run result. So I don't even think he even got out to bat that guy because he batted number 6 or 7. So he never got there. But God, why can't I remember his name? But anyway, the point is that there are guys that are now like specialist scoopers. And you get it with spin as well. How many players a couple of years ago, they were like players who couldn't play spin unless they were playing reverse sweep. And then now teams are just like, okay, well, we'll just put a guy out there all the time. Yeah, and that same guy who was like striking it, 1.5 runs a ball against spin and now down to like 1 run a ball against spin because they're like, all I can do is hit it to the sweeper. And so, one of my favorite things is when you watch cricket, Sanju Samson in that game where he got caught on the boundary trying to hit a 6, there was a deep cover. Think about how many times in your life you have ever seen a deep cover in a game. You have the deep sweeper on the offside, but they're usually a bit squarer. They're usually just forward of point, right? We have the deep mid-wicket, the deep cow corner, right? We don't have deep cover. And batters have, since the 80s, been getting better and better at lofting the ball over cover because there's no one there, right? They will continue to do it until you put someone there, and then they'll be like, okay, next position. Kyron Pollard has trained himself to hit as straight as he can until now teams put fielders dead straight.
Yeah.
And he's either like, in his case, he's like, it doesn't matter, I'll just hit it over their head. But if that was someone else, they'd have to come up with a different shot. That's what we are up to now. And I think that teams know what the strengths are with different players, but also they know the trends of players, right? It's such a fascinating thing to watch the sort of the game develop and just like, well, you can't bowl slower Yorkers anymore. You know, slower, back of the hand, slower balls. They were such a big thing about 4 or 5 years ago, right? They're not as big anymore. And the reason is that batters have started just standing back and waiting for them. You go, okay, he's going to bowl 2 of these and over, right? Okay, I might not be able to get the other balls away, but he's going to bowl a half-tracking slower ball. If I wait for it and I keep my shape, I'll just hit over deep mid-wicket for 6 every time, right? And so that's not going to be the case for everyone because some people bowl them better in all sorts of situations. But that's how the game develops, and it's so fascinating.
So I have the second strange question I have, and I think you again covered this while I was watching stuff, which is that I'm like, okay, Sunil Narine opening the batting as a pinch hitter, right? Mm-hmm. Which is great, fine. But what do you think of, which happened a lot again in this IPL, which is that the openers just decide that I'm playing the anchor role. And I want to know what the analytics say about how often that works, because it genuinely doesn't, like, this batsman is not out on like whatever 98 or 1,600 runs. I mean, okay, maybe 102 of like 88 balls. Something like, what is the point of that entire thing? Like, is there any analytics that says that A, the opener batting till the end to anchor the side is useful, and B, should they contemplate having a pinch hitter after the first 6 overs, after the first power play?
There's no analytics that likes anchors. I mean, fundamentally, T20 cricket is an efficiency game. So you want your players to be as efficient as possible. You don't want to be in a situation where one player is chewing up resources that they don't need to. Having an anchor in your team is actually quite an interesting thing, but you're better off to have them at number 4 when you need them. You know, and I don't say number 4, you may not use them at number 4, you may bat them in a different position, but you want them in your order to have one player like that who's basically really good when the ball's spinning, who's really good when the ball's seaming, who's really good on a shit day, right? You actually want that sort of player in your team. But you have to factor in the fact that some teams have like 2, some teams have like 3. And I think if you look at the way that England play T20 cricket, the West Indies play T20 cricket, and the way that India and Australia do, India and Australia encourage people to be anchors, and the West Indies and England are like, no, go hit 6s.
Yeah.
Hit the ball really hard as often as you can. And there's this big split between the game at the moment on that. Look, not all anchors are bad, and not all anchor innings are bad. And there are players who do catch up, right? But the absolute worst innings in T20 cricket is not a duck. All right. A duck is a duck. All these people going nuts about Nicholas Pooran. Yeah. And in the next game, the first game that Nicholas Pooran was replaced, Dawid Malan came in and was 20 off 20 balls. 20 off 20 balls is the absolute worst innings that you can play in T20 cricket, because you might still get out the first time you try and hit a 6, and you have now taken 20 balls to get to that state, right? In a perfect environment, the ideal players are guys like Luke Ronchi. Luke Ronchi's strike rate in the first 5 balls is 150, and his strike rate in the first 10 balls is 160, right? And he doesn't get any faster or slower for the rest of his innings. Somehow Luke Ronchi just manages to basically start there and just goes like that, right? Yeah, the whole thing is like the Chris Gayle innings is great, but we never talk about the many times that Chris Gayle is 12 off 17 balls when he gets out, right?
Yeah.
Realistically, what you want is you want a series. You basically want 7 guys, if at all possible, to average between 25 and 30 while all striking at over 140, right? Yeah. It's not easy to find those guys. And a lot of batters just can't do it because they have weaknesses in their game. You know, the reason that guys don't have strike rates over 140 is quite often because they're not good against certain types of bowling, right? They might be great against right arm seam bowlers. Well done, kind of everyone is. They might be great against off spin or finger spin, but they're terrible against wrist spin, or they're terrible against left arm seamers. So a lot of anchors get stuck because they don't get to face that kind of bowling that they want to face, and then they're waiting for their right matchup. What we're looking for in T20 cricket really is guys who can kind of hit everything. And that's the next step is being able to do that. But here's a fun fact for you. Go to any cricket net in the world, any professional cricket net in the world, and watch what they're all facing. They're all facing right arm seam.
Yeah.
Right? And they're all facing, if not right arm seam, right arm off spin. And if not right arm off spin, right arm leg spin. Right?
Yeah.
Because there are fuckloads of right-handers in the world, and there aren't that many left-handers. And any left armer who's good is already playing international cricket. Any left arm finger spinner who's good is probably already playing domestic cricket. They're not coming down to your nets to bowl to you, mate. They don't care. They've got their own jobs to do, right? And if you're a left arm wrist spinner and you're any good, you're already in your international team, or you're already finished, your career's finished, right? Those are the two options as a left arm wrist spinner. So you can understand why players struggle in this sort of thing. So I think on a basic level, what you are saying is correct. We probably don't want anchors, but we have to understand why people do play slower to begin with. And I think we haven't even got to that level. And the other thing is we have to change the mindset. We're still going on averages. Averages don't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
Andre Russell is one of the best T20 players in the world, and he doesn't have a spectacular average. It's because when he goes in to face 12 balls, from those 12 balls, he can score you 20 runs, which completely changes the complexion of the game. When you're talking about pinch hitters, you are talking about throwing in even more limited batters. Because if he wasn't more limited as a batter, he would already be batting at the top of the order, right? Sunil Narayan's on that weird sort of middle ground between being a pinch hitter and being a permanent player, right? The problem with pinch hitters, and that's why you're seeing fewer of them, your thinking is perfect, right? If you had a situation where you have a guy in your team who bats number 8 or 9, and all he can do is whack finger spin, right? Loves it. Just whacks it out the ground. Doesn't matter if it's spinning in, spinning away. Just he picks it up well and hits it. And there's 2 finger spinners in the middle. It's an ideal situation to get him out in the middle, right? That's what baseball tells us. That's what early cricket Moneyball tells us. Problem is, he gets out in the middle, and everyone knows that he can only whack finger spin, and they make him face wrist spin or left arm quick, and he can't hit it, and he ends up making 4 of 9 balls, and everyone goes, "Well, that didn't work." And that's a far worse innings. That's why we don't have pinch hitters, is because now teams prepare for every player on the opposition, and if the captain's even semi-literate on what the situation is, he won't do that. The thinking that you have there is perfect. It's just that, again, the game has kind of just evolved beyond it a little bit.
Right.
You see it with Sunil Narayan. People are just like, well, Sunil Narayan's come out. Well, we're not going to let him face any spin then, because that's what he wants.
See, this is why I couldn't become a cricket analyst. I'm just one step behind you guys. I just came one step behind. Okay, we have, this is the last question I'm going to ask, Jared. This has been a really fun conversation. I have a super chat which is popped in from somebody called BABY over, Baby Over. Why Baby Over is the best cricket podcast in India? Question mark. Well, there is a big question mark on that, and that's all I'm going to say. Angad Singh Ranyan. That's all I want to say. Shreya Sandhi says, do you remember Ishwar Pandey in CSK? And he played one T20 series for India and then vanished away. And another podcast on history, please. History, a lot of historians are going to be coming. I'm in the midst of doing homework, reading their books right now, which is a lot of work. And eventually I'll get across to them and do that. Ashish Iyer says, I've not understood how Bravo has been doing the same thing for so many years. Why have the batsmen not treated him as a spinner? They did this year, right? He didn't do as well as he does usually.
Bravo is really interesting. So my theory with Bravo is that he's really good when he can get maximum revolutions on the ball. But if you look, he's bowled some of the best death over seasons ever and had some of the worst. And so when he's massively dipping it, he gets so much dip on it that it doesn't matter that you can't play him like a spinner because his arm's moving too quick. Does that make sense? So that's why it's fundamentally hard to play a slow ball. It's because of the arm speed and the fact that the ball looks like it's coming at your head and then it dips. But if you look at his record, there have been years where he's been absolutely smashed. He's not a great death bowler, but he's had seasons when he's been absolutely brilliant. And he's had seasons where you might as well be bowling, right? He really goes between the two. But so he does get worked out, but he's a smart cricketer. He goes off, he works on his game, and comes back the next year and he's better. That's part of the reason that he's pretty old now. He's still going well. Yeah.
Okay, last question, which is this. Who do you think would have won if they had concluded the IPL, which we're still unsure is ever going to happen? Who do you think had the gumption not only to get through the top 4, but also clear that eliminator nonsense and then win the final? Was there anybody who was your favorite?
I mean, I thought Chennai were the best team. I thought they were clearly the best team. I still think on paper, Mumbai looks incredible.
Yeah.
And I was really interested to see how Delhi would go later on in the season, if they'd be able to keep that up or not. But yeah, if I had to, if I was out simulating the rest of the season, I would have said that it would have made the most sense for Chennai to win. But it's always hard to go past Mumbai when they look that good on paper.
So yeah, it's interesting. I would still go with Rishabh Pant because I have he's my unofficial relative.
I don't think
So-
he's a team.
Sorry.
I don't think he's a team. I think he's just a one guy.
I think they're called Delhi Capitals, but it's him. Yeah. Jared, this has been an absolute pleasure. If you guys enjoyed it, please give a like. And again, I genuinely listen. If you're a cricket fan, or even if you're just a fan of interesting things, right? Because at the end of the day, whatever our medium is, whether it's interest is cricket, it's football, it's Korean dramas, or whatever the shit it is, it's just interesting to hear stories about whatever it is. And I think that's what you capture very well. The Srisat article is great. The Harsha Bhogle interview I thought was fantastic. Abhinav Bokan, really great. And Neil Wagner. And of course, Ben Dunkistan, which has to be watched. So please subscribe to Jared. Give him some love. Jared, anything else you'd like to plug? Anything that's coming up?
No, I mean the YouTube channel has everything. I suppose I'm not really doing much at the moment. I'll be, I suppose I'll have to make a bunch of videos coming up for the New Zealand England series and then the World Test Championship. But yeah, if you've liked this chat, head over to the YouTube page. There is just a bunch of weird stuff that I will be making about lots of different things. It's not even just cricket. There's some weird non-cricket stuff coming up where I will be looking into the careers of Keanu Reeves and of Adam Sandler coming up shortly. So don't worry. You know, this is the thing. I have an endless supply of weird shit I'm interested in. It's just that so far the world's only mostly seen the cricket stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Adam Sandler, for those of you who don't know, he played cricket for Edgbaston. Is that a team or is that a ground? Essex would be.
Adam Sandler, in his movie, Dale Stein's in it. You know that Dale Stein's in an Adam Sandler movie, which is set in South Africa, and Dale Stein plays a bowler who bowls to Adam Sandler. Who's yeah.
So one of the new Netflix movies, is it?
No, I think it's one of the Drew Barrymore or Jennifer Aniston ones. I can't remember who his female love is. But yeah, it's so weird because we think of Dale Stein as one of the coolest guys alive. And they've made him into such a nerd for this one film. So Adam Sandler has had like all these great sport athletes in his films over the years, like Serena Williams and Shaquille O'Neal and all these different Lee Trevino. And it's just like a lot of them are quite good in the scenes. Dale Stein is so incredibly shithouse, and it's so great to just see Dale Stein not be good at one thing.
I gotta see this now. I gotta figure out Dale Stein and Adam Sandler. That's awesome, Jared. I thoroughly enjoy talking to you. This is like watching one of your articles come live for 1.5 hours. So thanks a lot, Jared. Really appreciate it. Thanks for dropping in. I really appreciate it. So kind of you. And by the way, we've been trying to do this for weeks. And Jared has been very, very patient with me because I'm like, hey, your time is my time. Is that your time? What is time? And then he's like, dude, just get it right. So thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having me on.
Super. You can switch off your camera. I'll just announce a few things that are coming up. Cool. Please give some like and give some... oh, wow. We have Neeraj Vashisht who already has the answer. The movie is Blended. Dale Stein cameo. Thanks, man. Thanks for the super chat and the information. I appreciate it. Please give a like once again if you can. And again, I have a lot of things to talk about. I am continuing the podcast. Let me know if you guys prefer this evening time, the night time sort of that we have, because this worked out mainly because I wanted to, it was easier for Jared, but also let me know if this is a time that you guys prefer, or if you prefer the morning 11 o'clock time or whatever it is. One thing to mention, of course, is this Saturday, I am going to be doing a show on Zoom, which you can come and watch. Tickets are on Book My Show, I think day after tomorrow. But if you'd like to just buy tickets, then head over to my Insta Mojo. This is the show where I'm going to be talking about the news and all the stuff that's been happening, including a whole segment called Kangana Ranaut Updates, which is always very exciting and important to know. You can, since the tickets aren't up, you can go to Insta Mojo and just pay rupees 299, which is the price of the ticket, and just mention the expert in the subject, and I'll make sure that you get the Zoom link or whatever it is. Please subscribe to the channel. Lots of fun stuff coming in. And if you have any recommendations for guests, keep those going as well. It's 9:30 like so far. Let's get it up to 1,000. I'll just read a couple of normal chats. Jimish Fotaria says, koi bhi chalega bhai, bas karte raho, bindas, tumhare liye karega bhai. Saksham Kumar says no. Rahul Kumar says, au. Amrita Ravi Mohan says no. And Ashutosh Bajpayee says, "What the fuck? We already shouting the movie name in the chat. Sorry about that, man. I was just very riveted." So yeah, no, okay. Most people are saying no. Everybody's like, Aerotech is like, this is also good. I like this attitude. Just also want to mention that Baby Over sucks and don't subscribe to them. They are pieces of shit. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in. I want to thank all my mods, Dhanush, Sharanya, and whoever else was there. Kajol, Kajol is back in our lives. Thanks for coming in, Kajol. Thanks for everybody who super chat. Really appreciate it, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to Jared's channel. Probably my favorite cricket-based channel out there is Jared's. I'm going to 100% say that. That's about it, guys. Take care of yourselves. Keep the suggestions coming. Love you all. Marry me. Goodbye.